Good morning, Kingsley community. Pastor Colleen Weirman here, coming to you with another daily devotion for Thursday morning, April 11th, 2024. I'm going to use this one, Truth for Life by Alistair Begg. And let's look here. Oh, last one we did was March. April 11. This is called Put Your Sword Away. John 18:10 through 11 says, Then Simon Peter, having a sword, drew it and struck the high priest's servant and cut off his right ear. Jesus said to Peter, quote, Put your sword into its sheath. Shall I not drink the cup that the Father has given me? Alistair writes, Jesus' arrest in the Garden of Gethsemane ultimately revealed his submission to the Father. When the soldiers came for him, Jesus had already resolved to drink the cup of suffering, his death on the cross, which is the cup of suffering, so that it might be for us a cup of salvation. But which of the disciples stepped in? Which of the disciples stepped in as if on cue? Simon Peter, of course, wielding a sword. Peter was no stranger to impassioned acts and words. He had attempted to walk on water to Christ. He had tried to rebuke Christ. He had offered to lay down his life for Christ, and yet soon after stepping up to Jesus' defense, he would fearfully deny Jesus, not once, not twice, but 3 times. So if you think you're a lost cause, think of Peter. Peter's reaction to seeing his master arrested is entirely understandable, but utterly mistaken. While Peter was willing to fight for Christ here, he was actually fighting against Christ. He was fighting against the very will of God, who had purposed that Jesus would be the atoning sacrifice for sins. Peter's example teaches us an important lesson as somebody urges, let us learn to moderate our zeal. Okay, good. Knowing Peter's action needed correction, Jesus intervened with a rhetorical question, Shall I not drink the cup the Father has given me? He was affirming the part of God's will that he had just prayed to accept. So in the Garden of Gethsemane, I don't know why my hair's winging out. In the Garden of Gethsemane, Jesus is praying to God and sweating drops of blood because he's praying so intensely and he's so stressed because he knows his death is imminent, and he knows it's by crucifixion, which is going to be excruciating. Remember, I talked about they had to create a word for what kind of pain it was experienced on the cross because they didn't have one, and so that's where we get our English word excruciating. And so he was praying in the garden for God to take the cup of suffering away from him. But if God chose not to, then God's will be done. And so God chose not to because Jesus became the cup of salvation for us. That's why at communion we say, Jesus took the cup of salvation, lifting it up to heaven, said, This is my blood of the new covenant shed for many for the forgiveness of sins. Drink this and remember what I've done for you on the cross. When our impatience seeks to intervene with God's plans, anybody ever have that problem? You're all very patient, right? I am not. We must learn to put away our figurative swords. We must trust God's plan, wait on his timing, and act on his command. The more familiar we are with the scriptures, knowing the great story, the promises, and the truths found within them, the more we will understand God's plans. But even then, there will be times when God's ways are very mysterious to us and we are tempted to fight that path that he's leading us along. Perhaps you're doing that right now. Take Christ's words to Peter to heart. Put away the sword, put it back into your sheath, meaning quit trying to fight God's plan, God's way. Now, God does not give illness. God does not give cancer. God does not cause accidents. None of that. He's a good God. He can only do good. So, but he can allow things to happen, meaning he could stop them if he chose to, but he allows things to happen. And so, when you're in the midst of one of those times that is troubling and you're waiting and you're trying to fight it in your own strength, you're wearing yourself out. Do all you can do all you can with whatever it is, medical advice, treatments, things like that. But pray to God and give him all of it because he's the one that's going to lead you down the path that is the right way. So it says, trust God's loving hand, obey his commands, and follow his lead. He is, quote, the author and finisher of our faith. Hebrews 13, 12:2. Now, Hebrews 12, verse 2. And the story God is writing is more glorious than you could ever imagine or direct for yourself. So, we know that there's times where we want to be in the driver's seat, where we want to not take the path, because really, if we can avoid suffering, we're going to go around it. I mean, I'm right there with you. I don't like to suffer. I don't want to go through that. But just like the Red Sea, they had to go through the Red Sea. God parted it and made a way. So God will always make a way for you to get through that suffering. And that way for you might, for some, that way is eternal.